You start playing like a chess game, it won't work, right? It has to be really authentic.
Can we start today, or do I have to wait till
No, you can
tomorrow?
start right now. From a mindset perspective, what I see people that are making the most transformations in their life.
Osvaldo, hello.
Hi.
I always like to start with a thank you, really. Thank you for being here. We're very happy to have you here in our new podcast corner with Endeavor Miami, where we like to talk about very interesting ideas, topics, and share with our community some more ideas from the leaders that we work with and interact with. I'll start by telling the listeners at home more about myself before we begin. My name is Faysal Abueljebain. I'm part of the Endeavor Miami team, and I'm here with the Entrepreneur Experience team where I support founders in scaling their businesses. So I have the pleasure of serving the South Florida community. And Osvaldo, honestly, I can tell them all about you. I've done my research, I've done my reading, but I think it's better if you tell us who are you?
That's a deep question.
Right off the bat, we
Who
start
are
with the
you?
depth.
Who are you really, right? But yes, I am an entrepreneur. I founded several business, and after losing my best friend and partner to cancer, I decided to sell all my businesses and start a deeper exploration. Right, so that led me now to be a business and a personal coach for founders and entrepreneurs.
I see. And from what I understand, you challenge CEOs to be authentic. We we hear that from time to time, people talking about being authentic, but I want to understand more what that really means.
Yes, and I can put that in the context of my own journey, right? So, for many years in that phase of my life, that I was on an ambition mode, right? I wanted to accomplish a lot of things, but not necessarily for the right reasons, right? So, I was wearing a mask pretty much all day, right? And I was not having these meaningful, authentic connection, but very transactional relationships. And the problem with that is that it's exhausting. You don't enjoy the journey. And when you finally get to that destination that you envision, that financial destination, it turns out that it's not as great as you thought, right? So for me, having gone through that journey, I realized that as we scale our businesses, right, as we put our energy into a project, if it does not come from the right place, it's gonna create a lot of complications in our life. So that from one side, and the other side is how do we really enjoy the journey, right? And to enjoy the journey, we need to work on ourselves. We need to connect to who we really are, because that's the only way we can flourish and we can authentically lead. So in my journey and with my clients that I work with, we work on how do you connect really with your heart, right? With your true passions, with your true superpowers. And how can you embrace that and flourish from there, right? Because there are different types of leadership. But for me, the genuine, authentic leadership is one where the leader is constantly growing and flourishing. And that's cascading with the people around them so much that they feel inspired by that leader, but that leader's vulnerability, but that leader's authenticity, but that leader's skills to make sure that people around them are elevating with him.
It sounds like a very vulnerable experience being authentic, which isn't very easy for a lot of people. And sometimes when we tell people that they need to be more vulnerable, maybe they think it's not practical or may drive them to the results that they're looking for, whether that's personal or professional. But how can we teach people to be more vulnerable, which makes them more authentic? Is that something we can all do?
That's an amazing question. Especially in some families or times where we grew up, where vulnerability was correlated to weakness, right? And what I'm suggesting when I talk about vulnerability is not that you're gonna get naked and jump into a pool that might be infected with sharks, right? Uh, when I work with leadership teams, and I tell them, right, if you want to make team, and the base of teams is trust, you need to make a strategic decision that you're going to cultivate that, right? Meaning it requires time and energy to create those spaces so team can build trust. And the best trust is the vulnerability based trust. Well, similarly, in our personal life, right, and me as an entrepreneur, for many years I felt very lonely, right? So how do we create these spaces, right? Because it's not that you're going to jump now to, we're going to get out of this podcast and we're going to jump and be vulnerable with everybody, right? No, it's a process that you build these lifelong relationships, or you build these spaces that are safe, right? Because vulnerability and trust go hand to hand, right? And you, to create these spaces, there has to be certain protocols, right? Like you have to, the person that is receiving your vulnerability has to honor it, right? By keeping confidentiality, by not judging, by creating this safe space where you can vent. And maybe from my perspective, I can give you an experience share that you can learn from it. But it's a nice way to allow yourself to create these meaningful relationships, so people that care about you can put light on blind spots, right? And that's the beauty of vulnerability. If I care about you but I don't see you, there is no way I can help you. But if you are in these spaces that people care about you, and I allow myself to truly be seen, right? I'm not faking it until I make it, right? Which is for a lot of entrepreneurs a journey for many years, right? You go to a cocktail party and somebody asks you how is the business? You say, oh, it's great, I'm crushing it. But you don't have the money to make payroll, and that's consuming you, right? Well, you need to have, in my world, a space that you can talk with somebody and says, I don't know what to do. I'm out of options here, right? And there's a lot of people that has been in your shoes before, and if you have this meaningful relationship with a mentor, with a coach, with a community like Endeavor that has so many people around it that has have gone through some of these journeys, then you allow yourself to be seen, and then people can help you. And that again is what I call co-elevation, right? When you allow yourself to be seen and you are curious about seeing other people, to see how we can help each other elevate. Vulnerability is key for that, right? You have to be real and authentic, but honoring these protocols to make sure we're honoring each other's vulnerability, and that's something that I learned because of the relationship with my best friend who passed away in 2015. And what I wanted to do is replicate those spaces where I feel and felt that energy, right? That energy of not judgment, authenticity. There's no need to carry that mask all the time, hopefully never. But it's a process. It's a process of reconnecting with whom you truly are.
You said something very important. You said it's along the lines of it's very important to say, I don't know, and figure out how you can get the help that you need to achieve what you want to achieve or accomplish what you have in mind. I think it's a cultural thing as well that some are more uncomfortable saying, I don't know. They prefer giving you a wrong answer or leading you the wrong path rather than, showing this vulnerable side that they truly don't know and prefer not to lean on you, on the team, or on any other resource for help. So it's very interesting that you bring up that point. For a leader to say, I don't know, how does that transfer down to the team? We can teach one person, you can teach one person, in this case, a business leader, how to be vulnerable. But how does that impact the team specifically, that there are going to be many personalities on the team? I mean, in this office alone, we have 10 countries, and with each country and culture, it's a very different personality and approach. So, how does that vulnerability from a leader impact the team and its
I
performance?
think one of the most magical and beautiful moments that I witness as a coach is when a hearts open up and connect with other people in the room. And that's true vulnerability. Now, when you're a leader, right, and you fake it, people in the room will see it, right? So you cannot fake it for so long, right? So that's why many teams become dysfunctional, because what happens is if you have a leader of a team that starts to fake it, you immediately lose trust, right? And you can still influence these people, but not with the right tools, right? If you use fear, if you use other mechanisms, yeah, for sure. But that creates another problems. There's no loyalty, there's no trust, right? So the authentic leadership means, to be vulnerable, and by creating this safe space, right? And again, being vulnerable is like Brene Brown says, it's not oversharing, right? It's not like I'm with everybody that I sit down and cross my path, I'm going to share my whole story, right? It has to have a meaning, right? So in the context of companies, if you're building a leadership team, if you want to cultivate trust, you want to have a team that can honor your vulnerability, even as a leader, even as, okay, we need to brainstorm. I have no clue how we want to make this happen, but we're a bunch of smart people. We'll definitely can put our energy to the best possible outcome. Let's start working, you know? And then that's a nice way to say, wait, this guy is real, this makes total sense. And by the way, what's going to happen is that as a leaders of the company, you own the culture, right? So this is, we want this to cascade. If you don't want people to have you lose time, wasting time with politics or with drama, with all the things that can happen in a company, you have to show up authentically, right? You have to be real, right? Patrick Lencioni, who is one of these thought leaders on teams, he always says your team know when you're sweating before you do,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
So you just have to be comfortable, right? Being authentic and being real. And again, what I see in teams that I work with companies, it doesn't matter the size, is when they have vulnerability based trust. That's the most strong uh, connection to build trust that exists.
You said something that made me think a little bit about my personal life as well. I find myself in a lot of situations, we actually talk about this a lot with the team, where we sit here for lunch, for example, and I'm here being very vulnerable and sharing personal stories and personal ideas that I have in an effort to encourage my team and the people around me to share their authentic selves with me as well, for a productive conversation where we can help and understand each other more. And oftentimes I go back home thinking, I wonder if I should have shared that or been vulnerable in that moment. You know, some people may not be quite open in return, making me question if it was even productive in the first place to start being vulnerable. So, how can I understand when is the right moment to be vulnerable with a team that I work with a group of friends that I spend time with, versus a time when maybe I should not overshare to everyone? I'm just trying to understand the difference between oversharing and actually being vulnerable and authentic, because I find myself in the gray space between that sometimes when I want to encourage people to be vulnerable, so I act vulnerable, but then I go back thinking, they didn't really receive that or reciprocate,
Yeah.
act vulnerable as well.
So I think two things come to mind. One, one is the intention. What is your intention when you are sharing vulnerable, right? And the second one is the expectation, right? If you are doing it because you have the expectation that something is going to happen, well, you're going to fail, right? Because when you play these chess like that, it doesn't work, right? It stops being authentic in a way, right? Because you are pushing it. You have an agenda, right? And I learned that many years ago when I was trying with a family member, right? Like it's like I got it. I have all this knowing now. I'm gonna help him change, and I went with all this agenda and all this expectation, and I didn't move any needle, right? So that's one. If you have an expectation that because of your vulnerability you're gonna accomplish that, and you start playing like a chess game, it won't work, right? It has to be really authentic, but it's something that you can keep practicing, right? And then it's the intention, right? Coming back, the intention and the expectation. I love to use these because it helps me as an internal tool. When I do things like that, or I feel that I overshare unnecessarily, I go back and I think, if this was done from love or for love? And this is a great tool, right? Because it is from love, it's something authentic, something that came from your heart. If it is for love, it's because you want the validation, you want the recognition, or you want to accomplish something, right? That's not necessarily come from the heart. So again, for me, is as a coach, I'm very vulnerable when I deliver, right? But it's because I want to connect the dots of the concepts that I'm explaining, right? And that serves a purpose, right? If people perceive that I'm being authentic, they feel safe to be authentic, and that's perfectly fine. Now, if I start planning a lot of these things because I want to, it doesn't work because I then go to my mind and I start to stop being authentic, at least in my case. Too much mind disconnect us from the heart, right?
Yeah. No, for sure. It's very important to understand the balance between the heart and the mind there. And you gave a great example of how being vulnerable, it's important to understand what purpose you're looking for in doing that, for love or to share love. And it brings me to my next point, which is that being vulnerable also helps us discover our purpose. I'm sure many of the people that you've worked with and helped out understood their purpose or refined it a little bit. But purpose changes with time. So, how can we be focused on the purpose that we believe we want to pursue, but being okay with it changing over time or with time?
That is a great question. Many times, like in my case, right? I was born in Venezuela and I was in autopilot for many years, right? I was following like my father's footsteps. He was a public person. I was embracing all his belief systems, a lot of stuff that I was copying from him because I wanted to get his validation and not taint his name, et cetera, right? So this all went on for many years, right? So what I thought it was my purpose, it was not really my purpose, right? It was very. I'm going to use that word. It's not necessarily the best word, but it was contaminated a little bit by this uh, identity that I was creating from my mind, right? I'm going to get the validation of my dad, so I'm going to go to law school because he's an attorney. I'm going to do my master's at a great university to get his validation, and then I want to do this and these businesses, right? That was not necessarily coming from a good place, right? But I think in everybody's life is a journey, and if you start paying attention, life will start throwing you challenges, so you can connect with yourself, open your heart, and reconnect with those superpowers that we have as a kid, right? And many times I talk with a lot of successful people that they feel they don't successful meaning financially, and they feel like they don't have purpose, right? And some of them, they even feel uncomfortable even thinking why they have to have a purpose, right? And what I tell them is like, listen, forget for a minute about the word purpose. Let's talk about, as a human, what makes you feel like you are flourishing, right? And part of what makes you feel like you are flourishing is meaning, having meaning. And part of having meaning is doing something greater than yourself, right? That you are servicing or you're doing something that is benefiting somebody other than you, right? So I like to tell them that, listen, why don't you do this experiment and start by sharing your story of the obstacles that you encounter on your path? Because somebody is going to benefit from that. And that's a great way to give meaning to all those things that happened to you in your past. But you are right, at least in my case, by connecting a lot of dots and things that happened in my life, I found my purpose, which is unlocking human potential, my human potential, and helping others to do so, right? Now, it took me a lot of suffering to get there. Hopefully, people do not need to suffer. Hopefully, I don't need to keep suffering the way I had that existential suffering because I was putting energy to this identity and this persona, and something inside me wanted to flourish. The real me, the one that had certain superpowers that I abandoned because I wanted to be this. I felt I needed to be this other person, right? So you're right. I think purpose is something that we keep uncovering, right? The first part of my life, I was always, praying or asking for the things that I wanted, right? Now it's like I'm more open and I ask, what I'm meant to be doing, right? I want to listen more. I want to pay attention what is happening around me, what is life throwing at me. So if I assume this mindset that life is happening for me, right? Everything is a sign and I want to keep uncovering really this purpose.
I feel when you discover and try to understand your purpose more, it leads you closer to feeling satisfied, feeling happy. Do business leaders that come to you or people in general that you work with tell you that happiness is a goal that they want to achieve.
Everybody wants to be more happy in their life, right? Some
But
people.
what does that really mean,
Yeah,
Osvaldo?
yeah. So for me, what that means as part of flourishing is that I want to be connected more and more with positive emotions, right? And we are addicted to emotions. So a lot of people are trapped in that loop of thinking and feeling, thinking bad thoughts, feeling bad emotions, right? So we want to break through that because we want to be more connected. And I'm an example of that. For many years in my life, from the outside, people will say how successful you are. You must be super happy. In the inside, I was not. I was waking up, connecting with not so high elevated emotions, right? Like sadness or anger, etc., etc. So this went on for years and years. So what I think people mean by that is I really want to fluctuate in these emotions on a higher band, right? And there are ways to do that, right? There are rituals to do that. There are ways to change your thoughts. There are ways to connect with elevated emotions. There are ways to rehearse behaviors that are going to lead to different outcomes. So we need to get out of this trap. If we feel that we are living a life with a lot of drama, with a lot of existential suffering, the biggest challenge to change is to make a choice different than the day before. Now, once we decide to do so, you gotta be ready because it's gonna be tough, right? It's like Dr. Joe Dispenza talks. Once you wanna do that, you enter the river of change. And that river of change, what's gonna happen? Everything in you wants you to come to a familiar self, right? But then you need to keep retraining and doing some of these rituals because you can rewire, create new thoughts, connect to higher emotions, and change your life and change your environment, right? The problem with a lot of people that feel unhappy is that the environment is controlling them, right? All the things that are outside of them are controlling them, and there's no way to succeed in that game, right? You can accomplish a lot of things. A lot of people can see you and say a lot of good things, but inside, if you don't start building your internal reference points, what are the things that makes Osvaldo feel nurtured, feel like he's flourishing? Those are unique to me, right? I need to find those, cultivate those, and embrace those. And you're right. Once you start that process, right, that journey of looking for purpose, of listening, of connecting with myself, the first thing that I started to experiment was peace, more peace, right? The anxiety started to come down because it felt like I was doing some meaningful work and I was getting to a place, right? And I felt it in my peace, right? So I think the important thing is, as many spiritual leaders have said, is how do we enjoy the journey more? And how do we feel as humans that we are flourishing, that we are connected with more uh, positive emotions, that we are engaged, that we are matching the challenges life is throwing us with our skills, right? And yes, we feel a little bit uncomfortable, but we're alive, right? We're embracing these challenges, having authentic relationships, right? Having meaning and accomplishes our goal. Those are things that make us flourish, right? And those are things that we can cultivate, but again, it's a strategic personal decision, right? I want to get out of this carousel. I want to build the best version of myself. And I need to do certain things to make sure that happens. Because if I are areas of my life that I feel in that carousel, I have to do something different, right? And everything starts with a thought, right? So I have to create the space to generate a new thought. So lately, I've been doing this ritual that I found fascinating. That every morning I journal, but I write what are the thoughts that I'm having that I don't want to have, and what are the new thoughts that I want to have. Right. So I'm creating the space for these new thoughts to emerge. Right. And then I think, okay, what emotions I want to feel that are connected with these thoughts. Right. And then if there are things that I want to accomplish, what are the behaviors that I need to do and rehearse in my mind to reinforce that these behaviors I needed to what I want to accomplish, right? So that's a way to break that loop that a lot of us are for so many years of thinking and feeling these negative thoughts and negative emotions.
And it's interesting to see you welcome these emotions and challenges rather than running away from them. you try to realize that they are a part of your environment, they make up who you are, and they're mixed in with the positive thoughts as well. So, how can you take these negative thoughts, negative emotions, or even look within your environment for areas that need to be improved on, and really think about what can you change about that, and how can you improve your perspective with these thoughts and challenges. One day you may realize that a thought you have is actually not that bad, and that bad thought or challenge or someone in your environment is actually creating an opportunity for you to further discover your purpose, further discover yourself. And I think it's very difficult for people to do. And Osvaldo, honestly, that's why I wanted you to be here today to talk to us about that and help us understand steps that we can take to being aware and realizing that how we feel definitely reflects and impacts our environment and how we act and the people around us.
Totally. So one thing that I like, the way I like to see these things is, if I'm having the same thoughts and I'm having the same feelings, I'm making the same choices, and I'm getting the same outcomes, and I'm not happy with that outcome, again, I have to do something different, right? So I have to create the space to create these new thoughts and go through that path again and again and again. And this mental rehearsing, it serves greatly. Now, from a mindset perspective, what you're saying is very important, because from a mindset perspective, what I see people that are um, you know making the most transformations in their life, they convince themselves or they realize certain principles. One, life is happening for me, right? I'm not a victim anymore. I'm not a victim of the environment. I'm not a victim of anyone. If a lot of things are happening in my life that I don't like, I co created them. And I have then the responsibility to do an introspection to see what patterns are getting in the way and are creating all these dramas and things that I don't like in my life, because I can make a conscious choice and do things differently, right? What happens is, and I can again talk about my life, is for most of the initial part of my life, I was in victim consciousness, right? Everybody was trying to take advantage of me. Everybody, and
That's
this,
what you thought?
that's what I thought. And I went, years and years, and then the situations keep repeating with different actors, right? And it took me a while to realize, and years of therapies and going to healers, the aha moment of saying, wait a minute, maybe there are patterns that I've been carrying since my childhood that are co-creating this situation, right? For example, because of the relationship with my dad, I always had to be the nice guy, right? So when I went to business, I was using these formulas that were totally not authentic, because I was acting to be perceived as a nice guy. And then people were acting based on that. And then I will regret it, saying they took advantage of me. They were not taking advantage of me, right? I was doing a setup for this to happen. So if I'm curious about the things that I don't like in my life, right, they're still happening for me, like you said, right? It's not to go to that victim consciousness, but to go to that co-creation, right? So if something is happening that I don't like, I can make the conscious choice of say, how can I best put the energy to the best possible outcome? And what does the best possible outcome look like? If I'm in victim conscious, what's going to happen? I'm going to be committed to being right. And once I'm committed to being right, there is no exploration, there is no curiosity. So again, if I assume the mindset, and as an entrepreneur, I think this is key. As an entrepreneur, we need to think that life is happening for us, right? Everything is an opportunity. Pay attention. The failure is an opportunity to really find the pearls, right? What are the pearls in this bad moment that I'm having, that I know is not permanent, right? So that mindset keep us moving, keep us growing, right? I'm sure you, because me and everybody during the pandemic, we witnessed the different mindsets, right? You had the mindset of the people that went and say, okay, this is happening for me. What does this mean in my personal priorities? And a lot of people reinvented themselves with amazing successful stories, even in business, right? And another people, they went to this dark place of fear, right? And they totally disconnected from themselves. They went to their head and they were, panicking and went to very bad places. And you know what? The evidence is there 50-50. What do you want to choose to connect to? Right? How are you going to train your mind so you don't go to that 50% that thinks, all right, this is the end of the world? Like Stephen Covey talks about the circle of concern. You go to that circle of concern and you deplete your energy because you are just on this victim consciousness and thinking everything is happening to you and it's the end of the world. Or you go to your superpowers, the thing that you control, and say, okay, let's get moving. What is it? What positivity I can get out of this? What is it that I can build? What is it that I can connect? How can I help people? How can I serve people? Right? And then that circle of influence starts to increasing and connecting with other, and then you have, a bigger impact. But more than the impact, you start having all these meaningful relationships that are key to feeling like we're flourishing as a human beings. It's sad to see many times successful entrepreneurs financially being alone, and I have worked with a lot of entrepreneurs that have sold their businesses, and it's sad because they invest so much time and energy in building something that they think is going to bring them certain things, and then at the end of that is when they has to repurpose their life, right? Because it's like the good thing, like there was a famous spiritual guru that will say, I'm the guru of the rich, right? And people will ask him, why you say that? That's like, why you say that? Because they already know money's not going to make them happy, right? So it's like, I have that already, right? So there's something to be said about that, right? And still, when they share their story, people say, oh, but now you can say that because you have the money, right? But I have seen them, a lot of them, go into very dark places because the mindset is not in the right place, right? So how do you keep connected to the things that makes us feel like we're flourishing, even if you sold your business for millions of dollars? Because that part of feeling that we're flourishing, which is accomplishing goal, is a continuing process. Because you sold a company for millions of dollars doesn't mean that tomorrow you're going to feel that you're accomplishing things. That's in the past. You have to wake up, right, and see where you're going to connect your energy, right? What are you building? What are you contributing? Who you are serving, right? Once you disconnect from that, it's like you start shutting down.
Osvaldo, you're very in touch with yourself, and that's a big kudos and credit to you because you took responsibility to not let life happen to you, but let life happen for you, as you say. And really, this is a difficult journey that some people may choose not to embark on, or some people choose to embark on and realize their purpose, what happiness means to them. So, thank you for sharing that. But I also noticed that a lot of people have influenced how you think. You mentioned your father, your best friend, some authors that you've mentioned today, people that have philosophy and information that means a lot to you and builds how you think. Talk to us about community. What kind of people do you surround yourself with that help you embark on the journey you want to take? At Endeavor here, we really pride ourselves on community
Mhm.
globally and here in Miami, entrepreneurs, mentors, investors, all of that, the team behind the camera here, all of that is really intertwined and plays a role in our personalities and how we choose to be around the people we want to be with. So, how has community played a role in Osvaldo?
So I'm going to tell you there are three major things that changed my life, right? One is attending retreats and experiences, right? Because that's when you experience things that might open a door to do things differently. The second one is having coaches and mentors, right? That's another one. And the third one is community, right? The tribes that you are part of. And the reason and the power of community is that if you create again these safe spaces that you can show up authentically, imagine getting the perspective of a lot of people, right? That is going to put light on your blind spots, right? So sometimes as entrepreneurs, we close down. And what happens with that is that we lose perspective. Once you open up and you are part of the community and you go and you say, you know what, I have payroll next week. This is a real case, by the way. On one of the masterminds that I launched of 8 entrepreneurs at the local leaders collective, one day one guy show up and he talks about not having the money to make payroll next week, right? And immediately
Not able to pay his team.
his team,
Okay.
right? This is a real struggle, right? And immediately we go to experience shares, and everybody starts to experience share because he's not the only one in the world that has gone through that, right? And he got so much perspective that he gives that testimonial today, that he, based on those experiences, he changed his business model. And part of the model, starting that Monday, right, he went to his top customers and said, are you willing to go to a retention model, right, where you pay a fixed sum and I give you these services? So he changed the business model. He never again had an issue with payroll, right? So this is the power, right, of community. This is the power of creating that energy of I want to see you flourish and I want to do what I can to see you flourish. And I think part of the magic at Endeavor is precisely that. You guys are bringing such an amazing community of entrepreneurs. You are doing all these learning events. You're making sure entrepreneurs have the support and have the mentors. The Endeavor mentors are amazing, right? So there is so much power on this community, right? And that's because you're creating a support system around the human, right? It's not only about how to scale your business, it's how to scale it in the best possible way, how to challenge each other, right, to find the best way to scale your business but also your life, right? Because we want to help people make sure that this journey, which is a beautiful journey, can also be full of joy and, yes, the challenges. But again, if you go back to that mindset and you have the support of the community and you don't feel isolated and you can come up and present on a problem and get experience shares or be connected with a mentor, well, you're well ahead of the well ahead of the game. Because once you don't have that community, I think the major risk that you face is losing perspective. And once you lose perspective, a lot of bad things happen, because that's when we activate the stress hormones and we cannot be on stress for too long, right? Stress is for survival, but if you're stressed when you don't need to be, you're going to collapse. And that happened to me. I went through a panic attack that I lost total control of my mind. It was one of the most scariest things that happened in my life. And it was all created by me, right? Because you put your situation in worst case scenarios that you don't know how to match, right? And that creates a lot of anxiety, right? And I think if you're listening to this podcast and you are an entrepreneur and you are feeling alone, there are organizations like Endeavor that are here to support you and create this support system around you so you can have these meaningful relationships that is going to save you time, that is going to connect the dots faster for you, and that is going to accelerate your personal and business growth, no doubt.
Osvaldo, I feel that sometimes people can be a little bit independent and may not see the benefit of learning from others. I mean, I go through this all the time at home. My brother is a musician and he sometimes wants to teach me something about music or about an instrument. And when I'm picking it up and trying to learn, at the first obstacle, I refuse. I refuse to take advice. I refuse to be coached and put myself at a point where I'm vulnerable to that advice because I want to go on that journey on my own. Right? This idea of independence. Some people really, truly can be very heads down building an idea or pursuing a personal goal with themselves. So, how can we balance independence, allowing someone to own their journey, but at the same time lay on their community, rely on their community to get them there and maybe fill in the gaps that they can do on their own?
I think the best way is to honor yourself and to honor your God, right? But you have to be honest with yourself, right? What I mean by that is, in my personal growth journey, I repeat this mantra that not everybody understands, so I have to explain it. Is I'm all in at all costs in my personal growth, and everybody gets a little scared like what at all costs means. So what at all costs means for me is that if I'm in front of somebody, right, that I feel is in a good place and they recommend an experience or they give me an advice and it resonates with me, I'm gonna explore it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna explore it and go deep on that. No excuses, right? Because I learned that before I was so committed to being right, right? I was so defending my own positions, right? That many instances I was wrong and very wrong, right? So that keep me trapped for too long. So now I'm super curious. I'm almost obsessed with my blind spots. So I go to mentors every month and I talk about the things. I give them an update, and I'm always with the people that work with me, my team, always asking about blind spots, right? Because I know how small a blind spot can keep us, right? So I think it's not that I'm gonna do what other people are saying just because I don't know what to do. It's that I'm gonna honor my gut, but I'm gonna be open, right? Because it's in that curiosity and that openness that there's a lot of good advice. There's a lot of good experiences that can enrich my life. And, I had an experience many years ago that I was starting to meditate, but this one was like a deep meditation. And in that deep meditation, it's like my brain opened up, right? And I started to see a lot of things in a different way. And that's why after that and other things that happened in my life, I became almost obsessed with these blind spots, right? And that's why I like to do that workshop with Endeavor, because I want to accelerate trust, because I want to make sure that you have a space again that you can be vulnerable. And if you have a blind spot, just by me being vulnerable and allowing myself to be seen, other people through their lenses, because everybody has a story and a context, through their lenses, I'm going to give you experience share. And then you have 7 different points of view based on different experiences that are going to enrich my context to make a better decision. So goes back to the community, goes back to the authenticity, goes back to honoring yourself. At the end is how do I honor myself in allowing myself to be seen, getting this perspective, and then what feels right for me. And for me, the best way to calibrate that is the peace that I feel inside. I know when there's no doubt in my mind if I'm going to make a decision and I'm at peace. If I have anxiety, ooh, I need to keep looking. There's something there that is not sinking, right? So I learned, and I'm learning to be more in tone with those emotions that are telling me something, right? And pay attention. So I think that's how you honor yourself, but also are part of a community.
Osvaldo, and you are definitely a big part of our community as well. You've been a mentor for us for a long time, and we're very grateful that you took the time to really share yourself with us here today. And I truly hope that those listening or watching embark on their own journeys in a very fruitful and mindful way that can bring them the purpose that they're looking for. So, really, I thank you for sharing this space and time with us here today, Osvaldo. And I have a bonus feature for the ending of this. I learned that you are a certified meditation instructor for the Chakra Center for Well-being. I wonder if we can leave the listeners with a very, very short moment of how to be present, maybe 30 seconds to a minute of just being in the present and really allowing us to close off this wonderful conversation in Osvaldo fashion. What do
Yes.
you think about
So
that?
so so the best way to do it is breathing, right? But before breathing, I want to say something because this is something that changed my life. When I went to the Chopra Center for the first time, and since then I've done many other retreats. But he talks in his main meditation about the soul questions. What are those four soul questions, right? And what I would like to invite the people that are listening to try this for a week, right? And the four soul question is, the first question is, who am I?
Who am I?
Yeah, who am I? Who am I, right? And it's fascinating because the first time you, if I ask you who are you, right, you start, well, I'm the entrepreneur, or I'm the father,
I do this,
I
I
do
work
that, right?
there.
But you keep digging and digging, and you keep repeating this question, and you will be amazed how you start connecting with something deeper, right? And something inside you wants to come out, and by asking that question, you start to connecting with that. So that helped me. I did that meditation for years, right? So that's the first question. The second question is, what do I want? What is it that
What
you
do I
really,
want?
what do I want? The third question is, what is my purpose, right? And I love that question because that's a question more than what I want, is when you start getting to this place of, I want to listen, I want to pay attention, right? What is it that I am meant to be doing? And the last one is what I'm grateful for. And before we talk about, happiness is not life is not happening to you, life is happening for you. There is a third one that I grasp. I'm not there yet, but I grasp, I can feel it. And it's when life is happening through you, right?
Through you.
And that's when you get out of the way, meaning the mind is no longer sabotaging you. The mind is really supporting you in what you are meant to be. And that's where you're flourishing from this place of less resistance, and things are flowing more because you're getting out of the way with all the noise of the head. When I do an exercise with entrepreneurs, that I say, okay, what is it that you envision? And make an honest evaluation. Where are you now? And what are the obstacles that are preventing you to get there? The bigger ones are mindset, right? The imposter syndrome, the fears, etc., right? So sometimes when you ask these deep questions, these four soul questions, right, you start getting more and more clarity. So I invite our listeners to do, for 1 week, do this,
1 week.
1 week, and you will see that if you ask the question 1 week who you truly are, that answer is going to keep changing, and you're going to start finding some beautiful surprises, because we're not our thoughts, we're not our patterns, we are not the quality of our relationship. We're something much more that along the way we disconnected from, and we need to go back, and that means play more, that means connecting more with our creativity, connecting more with our superpowers, and you will be amazed how people can come up with a new definition of themselves. Like, I'm this creative, beautiful soul, wise soul, right? And you start connecting with those aspects of yourself that are not tainted by that identity that you have been creating all these years.
Can we start today, or do I have to wait till
No, you can
tomorrow?
start right now. There's
Amazing.
never time to waste when there is in relationship to personal growth. I think part of the passion of feeling alive is embracing this concept. Life is happening for me, and I'm just gonna go all in and at all cost.
Thank you, Osvaldo.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Osvaldo.